Hello, everyone. We're back after a while, and we are back with a special episode of Across STEM with YSI, which doesn't actually involve one of our STEM Quest 3.0 presenters like recent episodes have, but that is equally as exciting. I'm your host, Amirali, and today's guest is someone whose journey reflects not just academic drive, but intentional growth, self-discovery, and the courage to navigate highly competitive spaces while staying grounded in who they are. And that person is Ria Wanshu, who is a neuroscience and psychology student at UC Berkeley in the Bay Area. As you probably know, one of the most rigorous and intellectually dynamic environments in the world. But beyond that, she's someone who represents a broader story that many students in STEM can relate to, and that's figuring things out in real time, navigating pressure, building confidence, continuously redefining what success actually means. And her journey spans far beyond just getting into a top university. It's about adapting to new environments and learning how to balance ambition with personal well-being. And whether it's her academic pursuits or her involvement in different spaces at Berkeley or her evolving perspective on the future, Ria's story highlights what it looks like to grow within STEM, not just intellectually, but also personally. So today we'll explore Ria's journey into UC Berkeley, her experiences navigating a high-pressure academic environment, how she's explored her interests across a variety of fields, and how her identity and personal experiences have shaped the way that she approaches both STEM and her future. So, Ria, welcome to Across STEM with YSI. How are you doing today, and where are you joining us from?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great today, and I'm joining from Berkeley, California.
Amazing. So, to start us off, can you tell us a bit about yourself, not just academically, but personally as a person, who you are, where you come from, maybe some of your ideals, and what your journey into STEM has looked like so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So, even though I'm a student, currently a senior at UC Berkeley studying neuro and psych, I'm actually originally from Virginia, the East Coast. So, moving out to Berkeley was definitely a really big shift, but one that I'm ultimately grateful for as I begin to navigate the realms of post-grad life. And it's a bit about me, even though I'm absolutely nuts about all things related to the brain. I'm also big into the outdoors, anything related to hiking, kayaking, just being outside and enjoying time with friends. Like cafe hopping in the Bay Area has been a really great time. Like super into Bollywood music. That's something that I've kind of grown up with culturally in Bollywood cinema as well. And I think personal ideals, I'm really big on just continuous engagement through like real world learning and just translational neuroscience overall. I think it's so important to connect the concepts that we're learning in the classroom to a real world application, kind of that relationship between the how and the why, as I call it. And I think having that sort of connection is definitely something that's really inspired my continuous learning. And I think my entry into STEM actually, interestingly enough, was less about loving science initially, but more about just that deep curiosity about people, why we think, why we feel, and behave the way we do. And that curiosity really started to take shape in AP psychology for me, which was during my junior year in COVID, where we began working through these neuroscience-based case studies. And one that really stuck with me was this patient who didn't feel pain immediately after a severe injury, and we were able to trace that response back to the adrenaline and the fight or flight system. And I remember being really just struck by the fact that something purely biological could so dramatically shape perception and behavior in real time. And that was truly a turning point for me in my learning process, because up until that point, psychology had felt very observational. And neuroscience really introduced this entirely new layer where you're not just asking what is happening, but looking at how and why that's occurring on a biological level. And that whole shift from just describing behavior to explaining it mechanistically is what really drew me into wanting to study both at Berkeley. And I think medicine in particular came into the picture a little bit later when I shadowed a neurologist kind of early on in my undergrad journey. And I met this patient who had undergone a hemispherectomy, so like half of their brain was removed after a major stroke. And despite losing that, she retained so much function, just speech, movement, and even personality. And I think that experience has really stuck with me and carried on into the research experiences that I pursued in undergrad and really revolutionized what I initially thought about the brain. That is just so adaptable, but also that there's so much that's undiscovered and so much we don't understand. And I think that's where my interest in neuro and psych really converged, not just understanding the brain, but thinking about how we can really apply that knowledge in a way that's improving patient care, but also in sort of that meaningful, personalized way.
Very, very cool. Thank you for that, brief explanation of your journey. And I think, yeah, your journey into neuroscience or STEM as a whole, it's unique because, as you said, like you didn't enter STEM because you were necessarily like very enthusiastic about science, but because you were just so fascinated by, how much opportunity there is to discover things in STEM, especially in a field like neuroscience. And I'm wondering, when you're double majoring in psychology and neuroscience, right?
Yes.
How do those two kind of influence each other in your studies? Like, do you think what you learn in psychology is very helpful for neuroscience or vice versa? And like, would you have rather taken one instead of both?
That's a really great question, and one that I definitely debated a lot in my years as an underclassman, because I went in wanting to do MCB, like molecular and cell biology, with a concentration in neurobiology and then cognitive science. But I think through coursework early on really learned why I wanted to zero in on neuroscience and psych specifically. I think it's definitely one of those disciplines where one very heavily feeds into the other in such a fascinating way too, because we'll learn about kind of like collectivist and individualistic cultures and how those shape like mental health outcomes and what symptoms people might be experiencing based on the cultures they grew up in, whether that's kind of like introversion or extroversion. Then in like a neuroscience class, we'll actually look at the brain networks that underlie those traits, like maybe the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or how like the amygdala plays a role in like emotional reactivity and fear-based learning. And it's just so interesting because it's like you'll learn about one concept in one class and then learn kind of what underlies it. And in neuroscience, you'll study those brain circuits, but then in psychology, you learn about what behaviors it actually contributes to. And I think one of the most fascinating classes I took that actually covered a requirement for both majors was called human neuropsychology. And it was taught by a doctor who's a practicing neurologist, Dr. D'Esposito at Berkeley. And he spent so much time talking about like neurological exams and how that related to personality traits and what sort of brain kind of computational tools you can use in studies, and how like psychiatrists or neuropsychologists work with patients. So it was really kind of just so interdisciplinary and at the intersection of both fields, and was truly so fascinating to learn about because they just work so well together despite kind of explaining different facets of human behavior, and that intersection has been something that's really always driven my studies.
That's very cool. I mean, now I'm wishing that I took psychology as a as another major along with neuroscience. But yeah, I get what you mean. Like psychology, you learn more about how your behaviors are shaped by your environment, by your genetics, by a lot of different factors, and then neuroscience explains that from a very, neuroscientific basis, looking at the anatomy of the brain, the physiology of the brain, diseases and what can go wrong, and how that influences psychology. So it's a very, I think, interesting double major to take, because it's more comprehensive in that way. So that's very cool. Now, I have another question regarding like Berkeley and the Bay Area. It's always an area that I've been very fascinated with, and I was considering going to university for. I'm wondering, with all the talents, all the intellectuals there, and the big startups and everything, and the amazing universities, do you ever get imposter syndrome?
Oh, 100%. I think that one of the, as you said, one of the most beautiful parts about the Bay Area and Berkeley is that, you're going to school among some of the most talented people in the world, and you're no longer like a big fish in a small pond. Everyone is as impressive, if not more. And sometimes you feel this sense of, oh, I didn't deserve to be here, or I don't deserve to be in this environment or in these spaces. And that's something that I definitely felt very early on in my undergrad career, especially moving from Virginia and having gone to such a large, well, not as large a high school, but kind of like a mid-sized high school. You still knew a lot of people. It was a very familiar, kind of comforting environment. And going to such a large public institution, I would say for a lot of my peers and even myself, it was almost inevitable to feel that once you're on campus. And to a certain extent, even if as I apply to post-grad roles, I'll be next year at the Yale School of Medicine as a postgraduate clinical research associate. Even with that, you still feel, oh, I don't deserve this opportunity. Oh, must have gotten it by luck. And I think Berkeley really desensitizes you sometimes to recognizing how amazing what you're doing truly is. And I think that imposter syndrome overall was something that I've gradually overcome and become a little bit better at dealing with, I think, as you navigate the journey from freshman to sophomore year. And I think being a resident assistant, as I've been for the past 3 years, has been a huge part in actually improving my imposter syndrome, because sometimes at Berkeley, I know we all have a tendency to want to boast our successes on LinkedIn and say, I'm excited to announce, I'm thrilled to announce, and you're just bombarded by this all the time. But being a resident assistant and as an older peer, guiding younger students through their academic journey and sharing vulnerability and saying, hey, I struggled in this class early on, or I got into this club and this is what helped me do that. Being very transparent about experiences and establishing that sort of mentorship relationship with younger students, I think has really mitigated the extent to which I feel imposter syndrome, because they're coming from a similar place. You know that you were in that place once before, and there's a lot of like effective communication and discourse that goes on when you're mentoring students. So I think that that's how I've kind of been able to overcome that to a certain extent throughout my undergrad.
Okay, I see. So you probably felt a lot more imposter syndrome at first when you came to Berkeley, and then over time, it was more like over time you probably became more inspired, I assume, right?
Yeah, I would, yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it.
Okay, and did that, play a big part in your decision to go to Berkeley in the first place? Because I mean, you're from Virginia, which is, on the other side of the country, and 3 time zones away, and then making that move all the way to the West Coast is huge. So I'm wondering if that was a big factor in your decision to go to Berkeley.
Yeah, definitely. So I think when I was deciding really where to go for a college, I spent a lot of time not just thinking about the school or the institution itself, but really about the environment that it exists within. And that's something I would always encourage any student who's going to college or considering among different options. It's not just about the institution, but think about what the surrounding community and that vibe is like as well. And I think what I really mean in that sense is Berkeley stood out to me because of the ecosystem that's really around it. Even though it doesn't have a medical school directly associated with it, we are very closely connected with UCSF and also broadly just embedded within the Bay Area, which I think is a community that really fosters a lot of social innovation, entrepreneurship, and there's this beautiful confluence of medicine, research, and biotech that's all happening simultaneously. Because while I might be a bit more clear-cut in my decision-making now, when I was coming into undergrad, I didn't ultimately know that medicine or healthcare would be the fit for me. So I was really looking for an environment that would nurture kind of other interests that I had as well and would continue to support me professionally in that sense. And I was overall just really drawn to the idea that learning is not just a place where it is only happening in the classroom. You take what you're studying and see how it's being applied in real world settings. And consistently throughout my undergrad, I found that Berkeley and the surrounding area is really an environment that nurtures that. And I think that mindset also really carried into how I approached my application. It wasn't just that I was thinking about neuroscience like as a subject and this is what I wanted to do. I think what a lot of UC Berkeley students have in common is you're interested in what you can do with it. It's not just, oh, I want to study this and that's kind of the end of it. It's all about that social impact, tangible things you're doing with your learning, and things I built like the peer support initiatives and how I engage in my community was really what I reflected in my application, and I ultimately felt that Berkeley was going to be the place that would be able to best nurture that.
Amazing. And Berkeley, it's known for being intense and fast-paced, right? So you're now in your senior year, you're going to graduate this year, so congratulations for that.
Thank
And
you.
in these 4 years, right, 4 years that you've been at Berkeley, um, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced there, inside or outside the classroom, especially, with regards to being such an intense environment with, again, so many talented intellectual people around you?
Yeah. So yeah, the Berkeley has definitely been one of, if not the most challenging and transformative environments I've been in. And I think academically, the biggest shift is I know a lot of college students say about kind of reminding high schoolers that what worked in high school doesn't necessarily work here. And I think that was a really tough learning curve for me because I know in high school was really easy to get away with like chugging and like memorizing a lot of stuff and kind of regurgitating it for exams and getting good grades based off of that. It wasn't as critical as colleges. And I think especially at Berkeley, whether it's through lower division classes or even upper division classes where I'm now thinking about a lot of complex kind of problems in neurology and neurosciences, they really, really, really drill critical engagement, keeping up with the pace and being intentional about how you learn. And what I mean by that is on exams, it's never going to be like, oh, what's the neurotransmitter that corresponds to like the reward circuit? It's very much of you're a physician who's administering like XYZ, like drug X to a patient. They exhibit this response, describe what drug was most likely administered and what effect it had. And then you would talk about like how that pathway kind of took place, like what's happening neurochemically. And it's all about all these problems, I think, are really demonstrative of the fact that they don't want you to just memorize information, regurgitate it, and move on. It's all about placing yourself in the situation where you're actually going to be applying the information and getting you to think that way. And that's really just a strong theme that I've seen throughout my undergrad classes is, while you can use Anki to memorize, and it's important to know that, you should also practice like situation-based learning and real-world applications. They really want to make sure that you're taking your learning and applying it contextually. And I think that's a very challenging shift to get used to as an undergrad student. But once you do, I can confidently say it's been one of the most, I think, rewarding experiences of my lifetime, truly.
Amazing. And aside from your academics, at the moment, you're an MSP ambassador at Kaiser Permanente, right? How has that experience been? How did you get into it? What have you learned from it? Tell us all about this.
Yeah, for sure. So I think in terms of Kaiser, this has truly been, I think, one of the greatest experiences I've had throughout my undergrad because we get to design a community health project that targets a vulnerable population in California. So what I've been working with my students is I mentor community college students who are hoping to transfer to four-year universities through AAMC competencies, which is basically the American Association of Medical Colleges, skills that pre-meds need to be successful in medical school. And our project has been all about encouraging like healthy food consumption and access in vulnerable communities in California. Specifically, we're focusing on Vallejo, and we've been creating resources to help the Hispanic community gain more knowledge of healthy food pantries and gain access to healthy foods, and also why such foods are important to their diet and incorporating them to try and mitigate the incidence of type 2 diabetes and even heart disease that we're seeing in local clinics, because we've noticed that the Hispanic community is very adversely affected by type 2 diabetes, and we're trying to take a very preventative approach and engaging in community development to try and mitigate these health issues we're seeing at the larger scale. So it's a bit of a reverse approach because so much of what we've discussed in the Kaiser Permanente group is how allopathic medicine traditionally, you come into the clinic, you have an issue, the physician treats it with medicine, and that's kind of how it takes place. But this has been a really transformative experience, I think, for me and my students that I'm mentoring alike, because we've seen the value of investing in preventative care and how you're not even seeing these patients in clinic because they're able to address healthy lifestyles from the get-go. And we've really addressed that through a combination of not only just the advocacy standpoint through flyering, but also engaging in community-based messaging and working with like church leaders in the community, or even like community leaders who are maybe like leading workshops or groups socially to try and get the message out. Because one of the biggest things we've learned is sometimes when you send like a healthcare provider who doesn't really understand the cultural or social dynamics of the community, it can be a little bit like outsider-ish, and they don't aren't necessarily receptive to messaging. So I think it's truly taught me the value of meeting people where they're at, understanding culturally competent care, which is something I'd really be interested in and am passionate about bringing into my work in the healthcare field as I move forward.
Absolutely. And from this experience, what do you think you'll be taking into like your future career from here on? You mentioned you want to go into medicine, so you'll be doing a lot more work like that. And what are some of the biggest takeaways that you're going to take? Because this sounds like a very impactful experience that you've had.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaways from that experience, or the important one I would definitely say, is the value of stakeholder engagement, because very rarely in healthcare do vulnerable communities and groups get to actually have a say in how their communities are being taken care of and how they're being responded to. And I think like understanding where they frequent most, where like maybe the Hispanic community frequents more socially, what their diet and food actually looks like, and how we can integrate a kind of intervention without being disruptive to the community is crucial. And I think that allowing a community to have a stake in their own healthcare is really powerful, and something that I've actually navigated on a personal basis, having PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is also common in certain communities, is sometimes I've been told to adopt a certain diet or to follow a very specific regime, when ethnically, like I'm South Asian, sometimes accommodating certain dietary recommendations may not be as sustainable. So I think it really taught me the value of working with the community, understanding how culture plays a role in healthcare, and implementing sustainable initiatives that are going to work in tandem with their lifestyle that can also increase retention, and actually following that early on rather than it being like crash dieting, or sometimes they'll recommend something but it's not really sustainable for your lifestyle. So I think stakeholder engagement allows us to really personalize healthcare, which is something that's been truly valuable. And second, I would say just like culturally competent care and inclusivity, because increasing the amount of resources that we have in different languages, or having care providers that are culturally inclined and understand how to work with different cultures, I think is crucial, because the workforce becomes more diverse, as is the patients that we're treating. And I think keeping up with those needs and how the community evolves is so crucial. And I think those have really been two of the biggest takeaways in working with Kaiser, for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, I've taken a global health course, and we did study a lot of those things. I mean, we didn't do anything like you've done at Kaiser, but learning about a lot of the disparities that exist across different marginalized groups in America, it really opens your eyes to, first of all, how privileged certain groups of people are, and then how some groups seem to be neglected and they don't receive the resources or care that they need. And they are, after all, the groups that have higher rates of diseases and also receive less treatment. So there is a huge disparity there that has, there's a gap that has to be filled. So I love that perspective that you have, and I love that you're trying to make a difference in this area. And I think that's very inspiring, because a lot of people, they just when they go into STEM, they take, just the academic aspect and they learn about the theory and everything, but they don't do a lot of, they don't apply what they learn or do things that can benefit society. But you're very multifaceted in that you're not only studying neuroscience and psychology, but you're also doing all these other things at the same time. And that leads me to my next question, which is how do you handle all of this? Your academics, your work at Kaiser, all the other things that you're doing and leading, and the initiatives that you're a part of. How do you manage all that at the same time?
Absolutely. So I think my anchor just for everything right off the bat is going to be my Google Calendar. It looks like a rainbow. I have every like classes in a different color, my activities in a different color. But even, while I have all my activities and everything color coded, it's also just taking at least an hour every day to just chill and do something to unwind. For me, I really like doing Zentangle, so sometimes I'll like just kind of do these random designs by hand each day to sort of decompress, and it's very like unstructured drawing, and I think that just helps me just detract from all the stress of each day. And that's something that I just really do for fun. And also, I think that's having that structure of free time each day is really crucial, because sometimes your brain is just on, and while you might be passionate about the work and you're excited about all that you're doing, I think it's equally important to just be in a bit more of a relaxed state, but also to be intentional about it, because it's incorporated into your routine. You know that you're going to do it every day. And even journaling for me, I think, has been huge to maintain that sort of balance and mitigate burnout, especially in recent years, when you're able to just reflect on positive things that happened during the day, something that you want to improve. And I think that's definitely something that's helped me a lot moving forward, especially just optimism, because it helps you persist through each day. Your brain is truly what you think and believe. If you think garbage, your brain is going to feel a little bit worse. But if you think more optimistic, you're going to be able to tackle challenges as they come and sort of adapt. So I think time blocking has really been that crucial strategy, and being very intentional with where I'm spending my time, and just varying things up, whether I'm studying in my room or studying outside. And I think keeping a delineation in terms of where you're doing work has also really been crucial for me to maintain balance, because I try to do most of my resident assistant work in the dorm, and maybe my studying work a little bit outside of it, because when you live where you work and you work where you live, that sort of combination can make it very mentally stressful. So it's something that I definitely rely on. And I also have like this huge whiteboard in my room where I write down deadlines for all my tests and assignments, so I can space things out, know exactly when to study, how to like space blocks in terms of like dedicated active recall. I think for studying for classes has been crucial, and having, I think, both the Google Calendar as an anchor, but also a visual map of writing deadlines down and having that whiteboard is really been really important, because I never rely just on one system to track my deadlines or when I have events. It's multiple systems based on my physical location, where I'm going to be. And I think that's been really crucial, because I know a lot of students rely on like Google Calendars and that reminder on your phone, but I think having different systems of organization based on my physical location is how I keep track of it. That's sort of the best way I can explain it.
Nice. So you seem to manage your time really well and protect your mental well-being, which is very important, because being at Berkeley alone is like very intense, and then you're doing all this other stuff, so it's very important to take care of yourself at the same time. So it seems like you really have that down. What tips do you have for students who come to Berkeley, or some other very top university with intense academics and competition and everything? What is a piece of advice that you would give to them to take care of themselves at the same time and have fun?
Yeah, I think in terms of taking care of yourself, I think definitely journaling and time blocking have really been huge for me. When you're able to clearly visualize on a calendar where you're going to be devoting your time in terms of classes and just related work and things like that, that also opens up your schedule to a lot of flexibility, because you can see when you're devoting your time, where you're going to be, and when you can plan times to go out and have fun. Like I will sometimes spend like a 4 to 5 hour stretch on a weekend waiting at the Tulip Festival in San Francisco to get free flowers, even though I have all of this crazy stuff going on and applying to jobs and things like that. So I think when you're able to visually anchor your schedule, it makes a lot of time for fun and engagement because you know exactly where you're going to be, you know when you have free time, and it allows you can just structure when you're going to have time to hang out with friends and visualize your schedule without really compromising your academics. So I think having that visual anchor is also key. And also just making sure to have time to just do nothing, like nothing related to school, like go out, taking walks around campus I think has been crucial, just to be outside because we're inside so much of the time with classes. And I think that's definitely been really important for me personally. And also I would just say a good social network is key. Having people either within your major or even outside of it, I think are crucial just to hang out with on occasion whenever you get the chance, and to go out with and enjoy the Bay Area or whatever the college town might be is just so important, because it's easy to feel like we're pitted against one another when we're competing for some of the same jobs or to get certain positions. But I think having a healthy social network is so crucial, and is actually, interestingly enough, very protective against brain aging. A lot of the blue zones that have some of the healthiest aging populations on the planet, one commonality is having a social network, which is definitely really helpful.
Definitely. I've seen, you probably heard this too, like loneliness is
Yes.
a lot more harmful for you actually than smoking. I don't know how many packs of cigarettes a day it was, but yeah, that's just how important having a social network is, especially in a place like university where even, you know, in a place like university, I mean, you move, a lot of people move away from home. They're living independently for the first time in their life, so it's never more important than that. And especially someone like you've moved, you know, from one coast to the other, so having that social network is just so incredibly important. So thank you for that advice for high school students who are now applying for universities and going into places like Berkeley. So let's talk about what success means in STEM to you. And we often talk about success in STEM as something that's very linear. It's with grades and the internships you get, achievements, and some broader aspects of your academics, like working in a research lab. But in reality, it's a lot more complex than that. So how has your definition of success changed or been shaped after coming to Berkeley?
Yeah, God, that's such a beautiful question. I think when coming into Berkeley, I definitely would say that my perception of success is very linear, because I think that's just the way the college application process really trains you to think. You have a certain GPA, you have a certain test score. If you meet a certain threshold, you're going to get into the university. And I think the admissions process really regimented that very strictly in my brain. And throughout my first 2 years of college, freshman and sophomore year, to be quite frank, like I definitely did struggle academically, and it was very different from high school because I kind of had just coasted. Nothing was ever really that hard for me. So it was hard to become kind of accustomed to sort of that shift and that learning curve. And I think it was at the end of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year, where I really began to see success as more multifaceted and truly more as being able to apply my learning in beginning to apply my learning in such a way that would have a positive impact on communities, I think was sort of the shift that I began to take throughout my work with Kaiser, through my work with UCSF. And I think that truly was the biggest shift for me, and when I started to also just see an improvement in my grades as well, because I began to take classes that were very socially applicable and taught me more about the applications of neurodegenerative disease and neurobiology overall. And when I began to shift it as this is something that I'm excited about, here's how I can apply it, that's when I think really noticed that difference in myself, not just using grades as a metric to measure how successful or how good I was at STEM, but rather as a marker of, okay, here's where I'm at. here's where I can potentially improve, and whether it was going to office hours or seeking help from peers or forming study groups, I think that improvement in my grades and performance overall naturally came just by being excited about what I was doing, because I totally, completely lost that excitement for, I think, neuroscience and why I wanted to go into the field early on. But I think through experiences, especially like Kaiser, where I directly got to channel psychological concepts into a real world initiative, was just so empowering, because it showed me that my learning was going to take me somewhere, and naturally that improvement in grades and scores just came naturally. And now the way that I really measure, I think, success in STEM is through being able to work on projects that I'm passionate about, using my work in the classroom to enact tangible change is really how I measure success. And while for some I know it can still mean money or career development or being able to attain a certain title, while that's definitely all things that I hopefully look forward to, I think as long as I'm guiding myself with that principle of I'm excited about what I'm doing, I'm seeing this change, and I'm being able to apply my learning, I think those things naturally come, and that's truly what I've witnessed throughout my journey at Berkeley.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And more broadly speaking, what do you think students misunderstand about what it actually takes to succeed in environments like this? They might misunderstand that only grades matter, that only, I don't know, things that are strictly academics matter to succeed. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, just share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think what students commonly misunderstand about success is that, like, oh, if I get like a not so great GPA early on, like that completely screws over my chances for medical school. Like it doesn't. I think med schools understand that you're going to struggle early on. You're going to find a learning curve, whether it's physics or OChem. Or even if you're not into medical school but thinking about some other path, that if you struggle early on academically, or if you don't get research hours, like a certain amount of research hours or a certain amount of clinical hours, like you're completely screwed over, or you have to accumulate all this experience early on, like it won't work out. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And to speak a little bit more on the high school standpoint, I had no research experience in high school. I barely had any hospital volunteering experience as well, and I thought, like, oh, no school's going to admit me as a pre-med if I don't have all this. I mean, truly my application read more pre-law. I had a lot of experience on school boards, like substance abuse substance abuse kind of work, trying to mitigate that in certain communities, a lot of policy work that I did in undergrad, nothing really related to STEM, but I think it was how I was able to take that story and explain why I wanted to go into a certain field that really helped. Because Lord knows I was very daunted by the ISEF winners and all these people who had competed in science fairs and didn't really think I stood a chance. But I think if you truly, what I've really learned both in mentoring students and in working in college is that curiosity and that excitement can't be taught. You can always get better at a subject. You can get tutoring, you can go to classes, you can learn more. With the advent of the internet and now AI, I mean, there's so many places you can just soak up knowledge like a sponge, but I don't think that curiosity and excitement can't be taught. And even in university, whether it's been certain professors that didn't think I would end up declaring a certain major, who had kind of advised me against it, or mentors early on, I worked twice as hard to make sure that was something that I could end up pursuing and put in the work where I needed to. And I think a big misconception is that you have to be good at everything from the get-go. I mean, there's still concepts in neuroscience that I don't understand or that are a little bit trickier for me, but despite that, I've been able to secure such an amazing postgraduate position. So I truly think that as long as you have that willingness, truly anything is possible.
Anything is possible, for sure. Thanks for those inspiring words. Now, looking ahead to your future, you said you're going to Yale, right?
Yeah, so I have a postgraduate clinical research associate position in neuromuscular medicine for the next 2 years.
Amazing. Are you excited for that?
Oh, I'm so thrilled. I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to the East Coast. It's been like East Coast to West Coast and now back to East Coast. So I've always loved the New England area, so I'm excited for what's to come for sure.
Beautiful. And at the same time, I mean, you must feel nervous, or do you feel like you would have been more nervous going from high school to Berkeley, or now going from Berkeley to Yale?
Yeah, so I think I definitely felt really nervous going from high school to Berkeley. I actually cried because I was missing my dog the most, honestly. I think when I was coming out to Berkeley, so that was definitely very tricky for me. He's a very cute golden doodle named Cosmo. That was definitely very tricky for me. And I think being out there alone and you're navigating life in the Bay Area, which I had never been to before, was quite daunting. But I think, again, that social network was really helpful in overcoming that and all the orientation activities. But it was really daunting because I've never traveled that far and been alone before. But I do really feel like it teaches you a lot about yourself, spending all that time with yourself, kind of what your likes and dislikes are, how you navigate life. Like, it's truly such an important step psychologically. And I think going from Berkeley to New Haven, I'm definitely very nervous because I think, you've been with the same people for 4 years. It feels a little bit like high school again, like you're leaving to start a new journey. I feel a little bit more prepared since this is like the second time that I'll be kind of going off on my own and forming that community again. But I'm definitely still a little bit nervous because I haven't really been to the area too much. But definitely, I would say a little bit more excitement than nerves at this point, but that could very easily change.
But I mean, now it might, I don't know, from how I see it, it might be a bit less daunting because,
Yeah.
you have all this experience now. You've matured more through these years at Berkeley, and you feel, I guess, more ready to take on challenges, and at the same time, you'll be closer to home. So
Yeah.
that's another plus.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
to wrap up, can you share a fun or unexpected or even like a personal insight, something about your journey in STEM or what you've learned throughout the way that
Yes.
people would not normally see from the outside?
Of course. So I think one really interesting, concept or something that I've learned is about hippocampal neurogenesis, which is basically that the brain can generate new neurons in the hippocampus, which is an area that's really crucial for memory and learning. And what is really, I think, fascinating about this process specifically is it's influenced by things like sleep, exercise, and even stress. So it's like everyday behaviors are shaping your brain at a structural level, which I think is so incredibly powerful. But an interesting fact from a study that I would definitely like to share that I'm not too sure too many people know about is the study that was done on London cab drivers. So they are required to pass like the super complex exam of all these different roads before they can actually obtain their certification. And what was done is, I think it was a structural MRI study, if I'm not mistaken, where their hippocampi, which is again crucial for memory and integration, were measured in baseline to the typical population, and they were found to be much larger than than the typical population, which is all that memorization that they're required to do. So I thought that it was so fascinating that the brain can actually vary structurally depending on how much you're memorizing and how much you're learning, which I think is really a testament to how you can preserve neurological and just brain integrity by engaging in certain behaviors. So.
Oh yeah, and it's fascinating how they memorize all those roads in London, and yeah, it shows how your environment can directly even influence literally the anatomy of your brain. So thank you for sharing that for those who hadn't heard of the study. Well, Ria, thank you so much for joining us in today's episode of Across Time with YSI, and sharing such a real, thoughtful, and nuanced perspective on your journey from your path to UC Berkeley to now going to Yale and beyond, hopefully to a very rewarding and very valuable career in medicine. You've already navigated a lot of opportunities and pressures along with them. And your story reminds us that success in STEM isn't just where you end up, it's also about how you grow along the way and the things that you do throughout the journey. So what stands out the most to me is how intentional your journey is. You don't just ask, what do I need to achieve? You also ask, who am I becoming in the process? What am I learning in the process? And that shift from external validation to your internal growth is something that defines not just strong students, I believe, but future leaders like you and people who will really make a change in their environment and for the people around them. So, Ria, before we close, is there anything that you'd like to share with us, or more advice to give to students who are still trying to find their place in STEM, in college, or like anything else in their journey?
Yeah, I think just for high school students, like just know you're going to end up where you most belong. I know it doesn't sound like it, especially when you're navigating the process and still have so many years ahead of you. But in hindsight, I think when I was navigating so many colleges and not really knowing where I was going to end up, I think Berkeley ended up being the right place for me in so many ways. So just trust wherever you end up and get accepted to is going to work out for the best. And for college students who are navigating their journey, I wish you the best of luck post-grad. And as you secure those internships, I know it's really tricky right now, but just persevere through, and you're going to find the best fit for you. And also, as an additional note, I'm also very open to mentorship and getting to know students. So if you'd like to reach out via my LinkedIn or social media, I'm always happy to get to know students and work with them.
Absolutely. I'll provide those in the description of this episode, so please reach out to Ria if you have any questions or need advice. Thank you so much again, Ria, and have a great day.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.